Hey everyone, what's up? How's it going? This is Finite MTG, and today I'm bringing you yet another Chaos Draft. They haven't put them on Magic Online yet, so gotta keep running them on my own. And this was a sweet one, but without giving too much away, let's just dive right in. Alright, so we have an M21 pack. I did enjoy that set more than most people. Nice voice crack there. Got my Mythic avatar from M21 pretty recently that I've been using for a while. And unfortunately this pack is not very good. Got a couple powerful white synergistic uncommons, which are not very good in Chaos Draft. It's just a little too hard to make those work. Even though you could go for the draft Griffin Airy Wheel Revitalize kind of plan. It'd be a lot less reasonable to draft the Veteran and try to wheel the Truffle Snout. That card's pretty good. But I ended up going here with the Finishing Blow. It's hard to go wrong with a good removal spell. 5 mana is a little expensive, but at least it's relatively easy to cast. Something's going to be wrong if I'm ever using that Destroy Planeswalker, half of it, but 5 mana to destroy a creature, yes, I'm probably overpaying a little bit, but the versatility is there, so still happy enough with that one. Alright, and then next up here we had an extremely difficult pick. I tanked here for a super long time because so many cards in this pack are great. You have Brazen Scourge, Experimental Aviator, Tidy Conclusion. You have some other medium playable cards as well. Thriving Rhino is also great. And then Sky Skiff, not the best card in the pack, but a nice cheap evasive card that keeps you open. That kind of card is so much better in Chaos, just because the fact that sure, the stats are not ideal for something that you're going to have to crew is made up for by the fact that evasion is so much better and staying open is so much more important. But eventually I decided to go with Tidy Conclusion here, just following up my first 5 mana black removal spell. And now there's kind of a glut already in my curve, but at least I am committed to a color here. So sad to pass the red and green 3-drops and that Aviator, but at least I have a plan here. Alright, and then in this pack, there's not too much going on that I'm really thrilled about. There's a kind of card that I always like to pick up, which is 2-drop with Upside in Chaos. This one has a pretty nice pump ability. I mean, there's no comparing to like Dark Thicket Wolf, right? That card is just going to be one of the best when it comes to these weird pump abilities. But this card is still quite nice. Turning it into a 5/5 is a pretty large body, and that's, you know, a great way for a 2-drop to stay relevant in the late game, or at least threat of activation is pretty real on there. So starting things off with a Crawl Warrior, trying to hedge outside of black here. Alright, now in this pack we have 2 pretty nice removal spells. We have Claustrophobia and we have Hunt the Weak. So we've already drafted a couple of removal spells, and those are both black. Not really into any of the black cards in the pack here, but I was thinking that, you know, Claustrophobia might be a little bit better than Hunt the Weak. But the important thing about Hunt the Weak is I just picked up a green card. So now with that 2-drop and this Hunt the Weak, I can kind of get some solid footing into green as well. So that was my pick here in a pack with otherwise 0 green cards. Alright, and then here we have another interesting pick. So we've got some decent cards in like Unsummon. The Rock's Meditant is great if you can end up in that exact color combination. But for me at this point I'm looking at Absorb Vis or Wild Leotau. And Absorb Vis is a card that's really hard to overrate because it is just so good. The basic land cycling as mana fixing is super important in Chaos Draft. You really can't get enough mana fixing. And Wild Leotau, it is pretty big. And after picking up that Hunt the Weak, I'm thinking, okay, you know, if I am able to have 5 lands, if I go turn 4 Leotau, turn 5, you know, pay the pseudo Echo, and then Hunt the Weak something, then that is a pretty strong curve, right? with Hunt the Weak, you do want to have pretty large green creatures in order to make sure that you are able to win the fights. So that was pretty appealing for me. I'm hoping that not taking the Absorb Vis won't come back to bite me, but no plans to splash at this point, and the Liatao acts more like a spell than the Absorb Vis does. Alright, and then we have an interesting, I think, Vintage Masters pack here. And so, nothing really amazing in my colors. Looking at like Scourge Familiar, which 5 mana 3/2 flyer, it's overcosted by 1, not something I'm looking to pick up here if I don't have to. Giant Mantis, not too bad, but I actually decided to go with Ophidian here. The card has a really high upside, and I already have, 3 removal spells? So the fact that not only is Ophidian a good reason to play blue, but I have some nice tempo plays to follow it up, make it a pretty convincing argument to consider a different color here. Alright, and then next up we have a pack, I think, of Invasion, and not loving any of the cards really for me. Thornscape Apprentice is very good in the green-white deck, much like Rock's Meditant, not very good outside of it. I've got Mourning here as a -2, -0 aura, and that card's not too bad. The most awkward thing about it is you would love to be able to return it to hand when your opponent's creature is about to die, but if you do that, then suddenly it just gained the 2 power back. So kind of some awkward play patterns with that card. It's not my favorite. We have Explosive Growth here, which is just a decent combat trick, nothing special. It's the kind of card that should make your deck most of the time in Chaos Draft. And we also have, I think, Goham Jin maybe. 5 and a black for a 5/5. It has Regenerate for 1 and a black, but then gets -2/-2 if black is the most common color or tied among all permanents. So 6 mana 5/5 Regenerate, pretty strong card in Chaos Draft. I'm only a little bit worried about casting it because it is 6 mana, but even a 3/3 with Regenerate can be a really annoying threat, so that was my reasoning for picking it there. Alright, and then we have not the strongest pack ever of Prophecy. Prophecy not exactly known for being the most powerful set, and I believed we picked up Flay here, so 3 and a black, and if you read it in a very, very, specific way, you can kind of compare it to Hymn to Turok. If you're able to play this when your opponent's tapped out, and then you make them discard 2 cards at random, most of the time, though, it's just going to get 1 card, which is really not ideal, especially for that 4 mana cost. So this card probably headed toward my sideboard. But yeah, not very much else in this pack. I'm fine taking Flay here. Alright, then pack 1, pick 9. Somehow we wield a bunch of good cards here. So the blue cards are both quite nice. Igneous Cur is not bad, and we also have a Truffle Snout. And anyone who knows me knows I love Cathodians. 3 mana 3/3, no text effectively. And Truffle Snout is definitely a Cathodian, so I'm all over this Truffle Snout, trying to lower my curve as well from all the 4 and 5 mana cards I've picked up. So really nice 3-drop is a great way to do that. And here we have Thriving Rhino, which is a card I was considering taking second out of that pack. Because yes, it does start as a 3 mana 2/3, but it attacks for the first time as a 3 mana 3/4 and then remains such, which is just super good value for your 3-drop, better than a Cathodian, so basically broken. Note that in that first pack, the M21 pack, there was a green-black temple that we did not wheel, Temple of Malady, I believe. So it would have been great fixing for us, but unfortunately, you don't see rares come around that late super often. Alright, then pack 1, pick 11 here. Not too many playables in this Gatecrash pack, so I went with this Simic Cluestone. There's a chance we would try to end up blue. We do have that Ophidian, and the other cards are not really interesting for us. Then here we get a pretty nice sideboard card, pack 1, pick 12 in Shrivel. Lots of X1s running around in Chaos, and this is a card that can really be annoying versus them. You always want to be on the lookout here for good sideboard cards. There's an interesting tension with trying to take or hate draft cards that would be good for your opponents that you see late in packs, and just pick up sideboard cards that'll be important for you. And I did get a lot of sideboard cards in this draft. Next up here, pack 1, pick 13, we have Might of Alara. So as long as we have a couple basics, at least a couple different types of basics in play, this is just 1 mana +2/+2, which is not amazing, but it's not bad either. So reasonably happy with that. It's a card we consider playable. Pack 1, pick 14. I could take the Mountain for signaling purposes, but no reason to give someone a Renewed Faith here. I'm going to be playing against people from the pod, and Renewed Faith is a fine card, so took the Renewed Faith here. And pack 1, pick 15, just to the land coming around. Alright, pack 2, pick 1 here. I do enjoy some Masters Edition, but did not really enjoy this pack. This pack has really nothing for me, which is pretty unfortunate. So there are some decent cards in the pack. Probably the best one, or among the best at least, is 5 mana 3/2 Flying Menace, which potentially was just worth taking here because there's a chance it could be blue. I do have that Simic Cluestone, and that Ophidian. Decided here to go with Thallid. It makes my curve a little bit lower, and eventually does, produce multiple 1/1s, which can be decent. Maybe not the most relevant or impactful in a game, but it's not literally the worst card ever. I think if I knew I wasn't playing blue, I probably should have taken white out here, talking about sideboard cards, and this one can be very annoying versus any number of flyers. Could try to wheel the Snow Mountain for the sideboard as well, maybe a little bit too spicy, but still kind of fun. Alright, pack 2, pick 2 here. We have many more options. Pretty good cards in this pack. So we have Suture Priest, classic, great card. Trespassing Soul Eater, not bad. Psychic Barrier and Geth's Verdict, some nice lose 1 life effects tacked on to spells that are a little bit harder to cast than usual. But I decided here to go with Mutagenic Growth. Mutagenic Growth feels really nice in most green decks, most decks in general, especially because outside of green decks you don't really see it coming. I liked it in my deck though just because it feels like we're trying to curve out. It's always great if you can go like 3-drop into 4-drop, make an attack that looks bad on board, and then your opponent's just confused, and then you play Mutagenic Growth and get them. Geth's Verdict was a pretty reasonable option, and Whispering Spectre is something I was mildly interested in, but I thought the Mutagenic Growth was a card that would get snapped up early if I didn't take it, and would make my deck a lot better. Pack 2, pick 3 here. This is a relatively sad one for us, because we are staring at that Lava Coil, and it really just doesn't do it for us. We don't have any mana fixing. If we had taken the Absorb this, we could consider the Lava Coil, and it's easily the best card in the pack, right? You have Conclave Guildmage, I guess, that could technically compete with it, but that card is super expensive to make knights, and it is multiple colors. So unfortunately for me, I had to pass the Lava Coil. Decided to go with Whisper Agent here. I am looking for more 3-drops, and yes, even though this is a little bit harder to cast than most of the stuff in my deck, because I don't have any double black, it is a pretty nice effect. 3/2 flash and Surveil 1. No, you don't have any Surveil synergy in this format, but a body like that does get better in Chaos. Alright, and then the bad beats unfortunately keep on coming here, so we pass multiple insane white cards, and a pretty good red card as well. So we have Order of the Golden Cricket, really nice white 2-drop. We have Burrenton Bombardier, very nice white 3-drop, and Warspike Changeling, a great red card. But we do have a decent sideboard card for us here. We already have that whatever it was, the -1/-1 to everything, Shrivel, I think, and now we have Fester Creep to supplement it. Fester Creep is a card you can main deck in Chaos as well. I think it's much more main deckable than Shrivel. But yeah, not the kind of card you're hoping to pick up pack 2, pick 4 when there are 3 very good cards in the pack. Alright, pack 2, pick 5, we have multiple non-basic lands in the pack, which makes things interesting. We have like Quag or Quag vampires here. If we wanted to take a spell, it's better than Myers Toll. It's not an amazing card, mostly good out of the sideboard, but I decided here, even though I do have that Whisper Agent, my mana is starting to look a little bit dubious. I could afford to take a non-basic land here. So Quicksand, some of my friends tease me about liking this card a little too much, so had to prove them wrong in this instance and take Dread Statuary here, because this card fits much better into the aggressive deck that we're trying to play, and Quicksand can't even hit flyers, and that's one of the main things we're weak to right now, so Statuary just fits our game plan much better. Alright, and then this pack, again, multiple insane white cards. Sunmane Pegasus, great card. Daybreak Chimera, great card. Shimmerwing Chimera, not as good in this format, still probably quite good. But we do have a Warbriar Blessing, which would be a great combo with that Shimmerwing Chimera. And so I'm happy to get that one here. Much better than like a Temple Thief or Setessan Training. So, yet another removal spell for our already pretty removal heavy deck. Alright, in pack 2, pick 7 here, I get to pick up a card that has impressed me recently. Not so much when Aether Revolt was originally out, but Peema Aetherseer was a pretty good card in this draft. Forcing things to block can be pretty powerful, as you all will see. We're passing Silkweaver Elite, which is a card I've never enjoyed too much. Even in Aether Revolt, it was a little bit too hard to get Revolt turned on. Haha. And that means that you don't get that cantrip when you play it. So the Peema Aetherseer was the pick here. And then pack 2, pick 8, we have an amazing pack, another dual land that we can't take, unfortunately, because Putrefy is in the pack, and that card is nuts. This is not the kind of card you expect to get 8th pick. Very, very good sign that my colors are open, basically telling me no one else in the table is playing green-black. Which, you know, not too surprised. We've gotten a bunch of green cards really late, wheeled multiple great green 3-drops, and even though black seems maybe a little bit less open, not too worried about that either. Alright, pack 2, pick 9. It's my second chance to take white out for the sideboard, and unfortunately I did not. Took a card I was looking at the first time around in Elvish Hunter. This card is not amazing. Goes decently well in a controlling deck, which is not really what I'm setting up to do. In original Masters Edition 3, I think this was, probably should take a Darkar Sentinel. This card's pretty good, but we are not drafting Masters Edition, so can't take that. Alright, and then pack 2, pick 10 here. See, 1 Phyrexian mana card wheel, which doesn't happen very often, but it is Mental Misstep, so it's not very good here. We have Mortis Dogs, not a card I'm super excited about, though it's not too bad either. Playing a really aggressive deck, it's a card I could consider. I just don't love how it trades down. Possibly still should be the pick here over the Whispering Spectre, which I did end up taking. I have multiple pump spells in my deck already, and I'm able to play a pump spell onto the Whispering Spectre and try to kind of mind twist my opponent, if you will, by emptying their hand, which can be pretty sweet, not super realistic, and again, that mana cost is really tough. But still, decent card, happy to wheel something playable here. And then speaking of wheeling something playable, pack 2, pick 11, we get Vigor Spore Worm. It's not going to be nearly as good in this format, because it's going to be much harder to set up the Undergrowth, but 6 mana 6/4 that can pump something or at least give it vigilance, and has that nice anti-menace ability, is going to be a really nice and annoying card for us. Pack 2, pick 12 here, we get 5 mana 3/5, effectively no text, because it talks about removing Tree Folk from our graveyard from the game, and that's just not something we're going to be able to do. So, 5 mana 3/5, hey, it's a Siege Mastodon, sometimes you'll play it, but you'll try not to. And then pack 2, pick 13 here. In the past, I would have hate drafted, if I saw a red or white playable card coming around this late, but these cards are not playable, so I'm just taking the land out of this pack. Pack 2, pick 14, we do get a playable card in the Setescent Training. It's another way of making that Spectre a little bit better. It's not a bad card overall. And pack 2, pick 15 here, just a basic. Alright, pack 3, pick 1. We have a few cards that we can't take that would be great for us here. So we're looking at Doomblade, Liliana Spectre, Cultivate. We also see some very nice blue cards in the pack. Air Servant and Preordain are excellent. Pacifism, quite nice as well. And a Terramorphic Expanse that we would love to have to try to fix our mana. Did end up going here with the Doomblade, thinking, hey, maybe if the black drafter here can't afford a double black card, kind of like we can't really afford a double black card, maybe it'll wheel. There's a Cultivate as well, which would be good for us, though not amazing. That's not really the kind of thing we want to spend time doing in this deck. We'd rather just play a creature on turn 3. But yeah, never going to pass a Doomblade here if I don't have to. Alright, then pack 3, pick 2 here. We have a ton of green cards in this pack. There's Cannibalize, which I'm not really interested in, and there's also a Serpent Warrior. So the green cards we're interested in, Spike Soldier would be quite nice, Skyshroud Troopers would be pretty cool, Tempting Licit I think would be solid. Endangered Armadon is a card we could get away with playing potentially in this deck. We don't have too many creatures right now with low toughness. Then Overgrowth is not a card I'm really into. It's even worse than that Cultivate that we saw last pick. But it is a card that we could play. So here I decided to take none of the green cards I'm excited about and just go with Serpent Warrior. Because with so many green cards that are solid in this pack, and it being so early in the pack, I was pretty confident that I'd be able to wheel one. And as you know, I do like my 3/3s for 3. Yes, Serpent Warrior does have a downside, but I was pretty confident after taking it here that I was going to wheel at least one playable green card. Alright, and then we have somehow a very similar and yet very different pack. So we have a pack with a bunch of green cards that I would be really excited about. Elvish Mystic would be excellent for us, really tempting for me to take it. Charging Rhino, really solid card, just like that Vigor Spore Worm. It's got that anti-menace ability. Hunt the Weak, we already have one, but hey, there's no Singleton rule in Chaos Draft, so we'd be happy with a second. And then Living Totem, not a card I'm really familiar with, possibly the first time I've seen it, but this card looks really solid to me too. So what did we take out of those? None of the above. Went with that Zathrid Slyblade. Pretty confident, again, pack 3, pick 3, that we'll wheel at least one solid green card. Because green has been so open, it's pack 3, it's going to be difficult for someone to move in, and for all those green cards to end up drafted. Alright, pack 3, pick 4 here. We do have pretty decent playables in the pack. We also have Complete Disregard, which is looking very nice. But here I went with Malakir Familiar over the Complete Disregard. I think Disregard might be a little bit better in general, but I already have so many removal spells in my deck. I have virtually no evasion here, unless you count that anti-menace ability, that I was really happy to get a nice flyer in the Malakir Familiar. The fact that it has Death Touch is going to be so much more relevant than that silly life gain ability. So happy with a neat flyer here. Alright, and then in this pack, I believe I ended up going here with Umbral Mantle. So my thought process here is not interested in any of the other cards, in the Reknit or the Wisps or the Fate Transfer or the Cohort Giant Baiting or the Runner. Hybrid Mana does make most of the cards in the pack accessible to us, but Umbral Mantle, even though it is slow, seems like a potential powerhouse card, or at least a potential combo card. The kind of card I don't want to give to someone else if I don't have to. So not positive it'll make my deck, but potentially a powerful effect in an otherwise not very exciting pack. Alright, and then here Bunch of green gold cards, so maybe I shouldn't be so surprised by this, but we did get a pretty late Quirion Explorer, and that card's really nice. We would have loved the Elvish Mystic from earlier, and yes, this is a 2-mana mana dork, and no, it doesn't produce the colors of mana we would want necessarily, but not going to say no to this card. We have too many good 4-drops that we'd love to cast on turn 3, so happy enough with that one. And then pack 3, pick 7. Once again, we are seeing that trend where we have one black card and a bunch of green cards. Hazel Pollen and Shed Weakness are playable. Bitterblade Warrior is the only one I would consider actively good. But it's too late at this point to try that wheeling trick. And even though I do think Cursed Minotaur is a better card than Bitterblade Warrior, our curve is really looking for some more 2-drops. So I ended up taking the Warrior over the Minotaur, going against the grain here of taking the better card and, you know, trying to see if I can Hail Mary like a Haze of Pollen that we would consider playable or something. Alright, then pack 3, pick 8 here. Green continues to be insanely open as we get a Pima Outrider. This was one of the best commons from Kaladesh the first time around. 4 mana 4/4 trample or 4 mana 3/3 trample and make a 1/1. Either way, the card is so good. Kind of crazy to see it here so light, but maybe I should have known. So very happy about that one. Wonder what got taken out of this pack. Alright, pack 3, pick 9 here. So a surprisingly important pick. Diabolic Tutor, not a card we're interested in, but we do get Back to Nature. Not a card I anticipated being relevant as a sideboard card, but I have already foreshadowed that the sideboard will be important for us. Alright, pack 3, pick 10 here. And it looks like the strategy of taking the one really playable black card and trying to wheel some green cards has worked out. So we have Endangered Armadon, Sky Shroud Troopers, and Tempting Licid. So we would really enjoy taking the Sky Shroud Troopers. Our curve is relatively high, the card is solid, but Tempting Licid is even better for the curve, and it is a Licid, and I'm pretty sure Licids are broken going into this. We'll find out from the games whether or not that's true, but always, you know, down to experiment. Take a card with a wall of text and see if it works out well. And then the strategy of wheeling playable green cards here continues to work spectacularly. We get a Hunt the Weak and a Living Totem here. Living Totem, card I would be interested in, but not taking it over Hunt the Weak. Hunt the Weak, card I'm very happy to pick up here, even though it's a second copy. I think my deck has been filled out pretty nicely to make it work, so that's going to be quite a good playable for us. Pick 11. Pack 3, pick 12 here, we get a Reclaiming Vines. It's pretty close to the other cards we can't play in this pack, like maybe Angelic Gift is just something worth 8 drafting, but decided to go with the sideboard card anyway. And then here we have Fate Transfer, which is a card we can cast, better than a Zealous Guardian, but almost definitely just going to sit in the sideboard. Here we get a Horned Kavu, so ton of red-green cards going around this draft. Looks like someone would have had a very good red-green deck. Pack 3, pick 15, just a land. Alright, so this is how the deck ended up shaping up after we built it. Went for pretty greedy mana base here, 8 and 8, plus that statuary. We do have a couple double black cards on 3, a couple double green cards on 4, so definitely making things challenging for me here. And keep in mind that sideboard as well, that I've referred to a couple times, and we'll be coming back to that a bit during the games. Here we are back for round number 1. And it looks like we have a hand that's pretty mana hungry, but on the draw, feels like it's not the worst keep in the world. If we find any land, we get the Slyblade in play. If we find any second land, we get the Aetherseer in play. Find Tempting Licid, which unfortunately is not a land, but is another castable card if we only do draw the 1. Opponent has Explore on turn 2, and a land drop. Fortunately, we draw a land here. It's going to be pretty important for us. Opponent has Sunmane Pegasus, one of those very powerful white cards that we passed during this draft. We passed many very powerful white cards. So here we get to go Slyblade, and then that means that turn 4 we're going to have that forest to have that threat of activation up, get in an attack with the Sideboard. Opponent has, let's see, Suture Priest, pretty good card. And I think the opponent misses that that activated ability gives vigilance, or at least isn't interested in blocking with the Pegasus at all, because they do activate it after attacking here. And so I can't eat the Suture Priest with the Pima Aetherseer pre-combat, which is a little bit unfortunate, but I can still attack, threaten to use that ability, and kind of time walk myself, but get that Suture Priest out of there without spending a card. They take the damage, and now I do just drop the Aetherseer. Oh wait, nope, I dropped the Outrider. Different one. And now I believe I make a 4/4, which can be a little bit scary in the face of like pacifisms and other good white removal that we may have passed. But with the Aetherseer following it up, we're going to get an extra energy, which is kind of relevant for that Rhino. And then we also have just a much better chance of eating something here. And yeah, opponent does play a Steeple Rock, card that would be a big problem for us if we did not have that Aetherseer. We don't draw the land, so we do get to drop the Aetherseer now. We're going to make the Steeple Rock block, and unfortunately it's only blocks a Fable. It doesn't say blocks target creature you control, because that means the Slyblade could potentially attack. But instead we're just sending with the Outrider here, and then the opponent basically has to double block. It's pretty free because I have no mana open and I don't have Mutagenic Growth in my hand, so we get a 2-for-1 out of the deal, get some trample damage out of the way. Not a bad exchange for us. Opponent now has Gaia's Embrace, and this card is just horrible to play against. Really need to draw my 5th land right away to have a chance of beating this thing. It's just so powerful. If you are able to hold up a green when you play it too, it basically just can't be beaten. So that's going to be an enormous problem for me throughout this match. So we do rip the land. We go for immediate finishing blow. Note that the opponent did not give their creature vigilance and lifelink this time, so probably something bad happening to me here. And yes, indeed, we have Reknit to regenerate target permanent, which will be interesting in future games. But finishing blow tags that Sunmane. Doesn't do anything, unfortunately. We attack for 5, and I mean the game's all but over here. Opponent again goes for that vigilance and lifelink after attacking. We go to 4 life, and if we just draw a blank, which we did, then we are just dead. Opponent's somehow all the way back at 19, and that's game over. So at this point, I'm thinking maybe I do want some of my ways of destroying enchantments. I have Reclaiming Vines, I have Back to Nature, and those are both tempting options, but the thing is here, they've only shown me one powerful enchantment, and it's not worth messing with my deck, in my opinion, to bring in cards that are only going to be live a small percentage of the time. So for now, I decided to just keep things the same and run it back. Alright, so in game 2 here, get a pretty decent hand, missing double green, but not too bad otherwise. Find a Warbriar Blessing, which will probably be important. Opponent has, yet again, turn to explore. Drop a land. And we top deck Truffle Snout, which is great timing, so now we get to go 3/3 here into potentially Aetherseer eat your 3 or 4 mana play, which would be great. Opponent plays Harrow, so not something we're able to eat. Harrow into Cultivate, by the way, so really ramping. They've played 3 ramp spells at this point, so they should be set on mana. And so now we draw the Outrider, but not the mana to cast it, so the Aetherseer is going to come into play. We get an attack in for 3. I'm feeling pretty good about this game, just because a couple of removal spells in hand, a couple of creatures on board, and I'm not too worried about whatever the opponent is ramping toward. It's kind of hard to find a good payoff for that in this format. Opponent has Sigil of the Empty Throne, which doesn't do anything on its own, so I'm happy about that, but it's very scary. Suddenly that Back to Nature is making a lot more sense to come in this matchup. So here we get another nice attack, and we get to drop that Pima Outrider. I think we just made a 4/4 here. The idea being if the opponent makes an Angel, we can go for Blessing or Hunt the Weak to kill it. And the opponent plays Overgrowth, so yet another ramp spell. This time it's an enchantment though, and that means they get a 4/4 Angel, which is quite nice for them. And bad news for me, unfortunately, they have a Gaia's Embrace on the Angel to make another Angel. So we are now staring down 11 power worth of flying, and they can regenerate their 7/7, so we are now in pretty rough shape. Draw a Whisper Agent here, and that lets us have a nice mana efficient turn. We can go Warbriar Blessing on the Pima Outrider to fight the 4/4 Angel, and we have Whisper Agent to set up our draw step for next turn. So no reason to force blocks or anything like that, no reason to chump attack at this point in the game, because we're just going to be putting another creature into play. We're going to have another removal spell, Hunt the Weak, for potentially another Angel or whatever other blocker they could play here. Opponent has Tawkrop Elite, which is a solid card but not super threatening compared to any enchantment. So we go for that Whisper Agent. We find a Putrefy. So Putrefy cannot blow up enchantments, unfortunately. That would be Mortify. But it does have a pretty relevant line of text that I believe is not on Mortify, which is can't be regenerated. So that Angel is now toast, which is extremely good for us. And so now we just have a huge attack. Don't even need to force a block, no reason to do that. Just crash in with everything. The opponent blocks the Whisper Agent. They should block the Ether Seer, just in case I'm able to make them block with something they wouldn't want to. But it looks like they do have, I think, yeah, Reknit here to save their creature. Which, you know, they're still at 1 life, facing down 3 creatures in play and a removal spell. So, I mean, this game's basically over. And, yep, on to game 3. So now, like I mentioned, just going to tell you guys that I brought in the Back to Nature. We have seen a few enchantments so far, and that Sigil of the Empty Throne is scary enough that I've decided, you know what, it doesn't actually answer any angels, but there's a chance I could snipe that Sigil before an angel comes down. And that Gaia's Embrace is so problematic, you know, it's not the worst thing to have a card for it, other than Putrefy. Alright, back for game 3 here. We are on the draw, which is kind of scary against this deck. Pretty good hand, though. Doomblade, multiple 3-drops that are castable, and if we find any 4th land, that Liatao becomes castable as well. So we drop the Swamp. Opponent has turn 2 Explore, 3 games in a row, into a land drop, 3 games in a row. We are just passing the turn here, holding up Doomblade. Opponent has Overgrowth, which is a little bit scary. Not the end of the world here. It looks like they missed a land drop this time. Now we get to go Serpent Warrior over the Malakir Familiar, just trying to get the bigger creature into play and get some damage through with it while I can. That's going to be our plan next turn as well with that Outrider. Opponent has Rock's Meditant, which is super annoying as it does block the 3/3, getting punished now for not playing the Familiar. And note that Meditant just cares about a green permanent, which is a theme that we will see in this game. And that Overgrowth qualifies. So we put a +1/+1 counter on the Outrider and just pass the turn here. Missing double black, crucially, to double spell next turn or to play that Tidy Conclusion. Opponent fetches up the Gaia's Embrace, which is very scary for us. And now we, still missing double black, cannot play Slyblade into Doomblade or Familiar into Doomblade. But we do get an attack. I think I attacked with both, trying to basically bait out that Gaia's Embrace on the Rock's Meditant. I don't think it's very likely to happen, but I do think it's possible. And Idyllic Tutor's pretty sweet in their deck as well. They have a really cool deck. More synergy than you usually find. They have a Cultivate here. They tap 4 mana, and I'm hoping for that Embrace so I can just Doomblade their Meditant and move along, not spend my mana so awkwardly. But unfortunately they play Tawkrop Elite. And opponent decides not to attack with the Meditant, which is probably a good choice. And now I'm going to Doomblade the Meditant so my Serpent Warrior can finally be relevant here. So now I draw Back to Nature, which is great. I never want to trade Back to Nature for Overgrowth here. I don't really care about Overgrowth. I just care about the fact that they have a terrifying aura in hand. And if I blow up to their enchantments, then the Sigil is much less likely to be relevant as well. So I go for a big attack here, which is nice, very important to trying to win this game. And I think here I drop the Familiar, don't really remember. Nope, Slideblade. Okay, that's fine too. Opponent has Legion's Judgment on my Pima Outrider, which is pretty terrible for me. Pretty good sideboard card against me too. And now they have Dawn Feather Eagle. So once again, not playing that Gaia's Embrace, which is a big part of the reason we're holding up Back to Nature. Potentially it's just a better play for me though to just drop that Wild Liatao. Start worrying about that, and I can just Back to Nature on a future turn. That's probably a more reasonable play here. So opponent now has a Vigilant Tawcrop Elite, which attacks, but they can actually exert here to get one more point of damage. It looks like that was not something that happened, and now we go to my turn. We have a Hunt the Weak here, which we can use to kill that Dawn Feather Eagle, but I'm really trying to snipe. And yeah, we do get to make a nice attack here with the Slideblade. They can't really block the Slideblade ever, which is very nice for us. But yeah, we get to make a nice attack into their creatures once again. Now I think I drop the Familiar, and still holding up that Back to Nature. Once again, I think this game goes a lot easier for me if I just play the Wild Liatao, but I'm practically obsessed at this point with trying to kill that Gaia's Embrace. Sure, the opponent knows something's up. They do drop it here. They go for an attack, and I try to go for a Back to Nature, so I only take a couple damage. And unfortunately for me, they have Reknit. So Reknit does regenerate target permanent, which means they're able to save that Gaia's Embrace. It can't regenerate itself, it can only regenerate the creature it's attached to. But Reknit does get it here. Target permanent, much like that Rhino. So now, still staring down that 5/5 with Regenerate, which is really horrible for me. Still missing double black, and looks like I'm basically losing this game, which is not good at all. They have Oromancer to get back Overgrowth. We don't really care about the Overgrowth too much, but it's kind of annoying that they just had a blocker here. That said, it doesn't really block well. We're able to make an attack, and once again they don't block. And now I think I go for this Wild Liatao, finally, thinking that I can still play the Hunt the Weak next turn, despite having to pay a green mana. And if I draw a Swamp, then I can still cast Tidy Conclusion too. So the Liatao happens, and then we draw Whispering Spectre, unfortunately uncastable for us. I think I just play the Rhino here, pass the turn. That Slideblade is not going to be super effective in the face of Regenerate. Could try to sneak in for some damage, but doesn't really work. So passing the turn now. Opponent passing the turn as well. And opponent just decides to concede here, which is not super unreasonable. Our play this turn is going to be Hunt the Weak on the Oromancer to get that out of the way, and then we just make a big attack. Even if they block, like the Liatao for instance, they're still just taking a bunch of damage, and even with a couple cards in hand, it looks like they did not have what they needed to survive. So we escaped with this one. Like I said, probably should have played that Liatao a long time ago, but still pretty happy with how this deck is playing. Alright, we're back for round number 2 now. And it looks like our hand is pretty decent. We have a castable 2-drop in both colors of mana and a mutagenic growth, but we are missing some important colors of mana here. So we draw Hunt the Weak, which is not ideal. Opponent has Samite Pilgrim, pretty powerful card. And we drop Swamp here, despite drawing Forest, because if we do draw Swamp, we want to be able to play Spectre turn 3. Opponent has a Trespassing Soul Eater. and no attack, of course, with the Pilgrim. Oh. So now we get to exert an attack into the Samite Pilgrim. Basically, the idea here is, yes, they can prevent 2 damage it would deal to something, but we can still trade with their Soul Eater if it blocks. And if they double block for some reason, then we're trading for their Pilgrim. But we do get some damage in here. We could have used the Mutagenic Growth this turn and played the Spectre, but my plan with the Spectre is to use the Mutagenic Growth on it next turn, and hopefully get 3 cards out of their hand, and hopefully basically win the game with that. So opponent now goes for an attack with the Trespassing Soul Eater, which of course I cannot block. And they just pass the turn here, relatively suspiciously for sure. There's not much I can do about it. And so now I try to get really tricky here, and unfortunately do not succeed. So I play this Pima Outrider pre-combat, thinking that if they have a counter spell, we'll be seeing that now, and that means I'll be safe to make that play with my Whispering Spectre. But they do not have a counter, so the Outrider is going to resolve as a 4/4. We attack for 1, and the opponent has Excise, X equals 1, to exile an attacking creature, which means I'm not going to be able to use that Mutagenic Growth, not going to be able to get 3 cards out of their hand, which is a pretty big bummer for me. That said, though, the rest of my creatures are pretty relevant threats, and the Spectre isn't one, so really, either way, things work out well for me here. Opponent has Experimental Aviator, one of those very powerful cards from Kaladesh that I passed. They decide not to trade 2 damage for 2 by attacking with the Soul Eater, which probably makes sense. And then here we get to go Hunt the Weak and kill that Samite Pilgrim. Opponent prevents some damage to their Aviator, but now we do have that Mutagenic Growth up, and they attempt to put 4 power and toughness in front of my Outrider to kill it, but that Mutagenic Growth, just the regular cost, is going to be good enough to take down all those blockers. Opponent now has a really interesting rare that can bounce their Aviator, which is very good for them. So now we attack with our Outrider here, and opponent is going to go for a Sift, and they find double blue, which means they can bounce that Aviator to their hand. They can also bounce any of my creatures, but bouncing Aviator is looking much better for them here. So here I just attack with everything. Not thrilled about drawing a land, but not the end of the world. They trade for the Sharpshooter, and they bounce that Aviator to their hand, and yeah, they decide to give it up here. Facing down 5/5 trample and 6/4 anti-menace. So pretty rough spot for them, and we drew pretty well, so happy about that. Back here for round number 2, game 2, and we have a pretty good hand, missing some lands as usual, but both colors of mana, that's really what we're looking for. We find the Quirion Explorer here, as opponent drops a Soltari Emissary. So we get to play the Explorer here, so if we miss a land, we still get to play the Rhino or the Putrefy, but the opponent has a nice tempo on summon to set us back a land drop. We'd rip a land off the top and drop the Rhino. Not happy that it wasn't a forest, but can't really complain about finding my land there. Opponent decides to return their creature to their hand, which is a bit confusing here. Wondering what they're up to for sure. But they are up to Oketra's Monument plus replaying the creature, and they could not have played that Deputy because it would still cost the same amount. So actually makes plenty of sense, and that Oketra's Monument is looking very scary. Nice play from them. We go for an attack here, and we do have Putrefy to blow out any double block. I mean, a double block would already be kind of a blowout here. Could just like accept it and be pretty happy with that too. But the opponent takes it, and we, I think, have to drop the Explorer once again. I'm just looking to find some more mana. Opponent has a Celestial Colonnade in play, by the way, and that thing is starting to get more relevant here. They have a selfless Cathar now, which, as they just make a ton of 1/1s, now 5 1/1s, That Cathar is looking pretty scary here. And unfortunately, perhaps I was supposed to play a different card here. My thinking was I needed the mana so badly I had to play the Explorer, but if I just play the Warrior or the, well, either of the Warriors, I guess, then suddenly the Warrior token from the opponent can't attack and I can trade for the Deputy. So, possible that I messed up here. They do give Shadow. We find a Swamp, which is not the land we were looking for. So now my play is go for a Hunt the Weak on the Selfless Cathar, fighting with the Quirion. So kind of doubling down on this X1 that we played here, so now suddenly it can block their creatures, but we are just in a really rough spot, as I'm sure the Colonnade is getting activated here. And the opponent has a neat play where they get to use the Colonnade after attacking to give Shadow to the Emissary. So that's what they go for here. And they just get in with everything but the Samite Pilgrim. We put the Rhino on the 2/2 and our 2/2 on one of their 1/1s, but we're just taking so much damage this game. So now finally we find double green, but we need to hold up Putrefy so we can kill that Colonnade so we don't just die. Opponent goes for the same play again, and I just decide to kill it right here. They've already seen the line where you use the Colonnade to give Shadow to the Emissary, so it's not like they're going to miss it this time. So just go ahead and kill the Colonnade. We are taking 2 damage no matter what here, though. Looks like we are only taking 2 damage, which is nice. We do draw a Warbriar Blessing, which is going to allow us to kill that Sultari Emissary. Even with the Samite Pilgrim preventing 2 damage to it, we just put it on the Rhino, and 3 - 2 is still enough to kill it. And then we drop the Crawl Warrior as well, but things are not looking very good for us here. So, opponent has Experimental Aviator, which is very bad news for me. Just makes them a ton of creatures, and with 2 creatures that have flying, there's not really anything I can do. I don't have any creatures with reach in my deck, I don't believe. I do have a Tidy Conclusion in hand, but it's not really meant to be cast on a 1/1 Thopter. Alright, so we just draw a Swamp. It's really not going to cut it here. We have to kill a Thopter now. Opponent has Sift. We kill a Thopter, so we only go down to 2. So technically I have an extra turn to try to get out of this, but opponent has Gustwalker, which changes that, and all of a sudden we are just dead here. So before we go on to game number 3, it's important to consult our sideboard here and see if we have anything we can do about what was happening. We do have one really nice green card here in Reclaiming Vines. That's going to be able to blow up a land or an artifact, and that means we can blow up the Oketra's Monument, or we can blow up that Celestial Colonnade. And both of those cards were pretty scary for us that entire game. And then we also have ways to deal with the Oketra's Monument after it's made some 1/1s, not to mention that Experimental Aviator. We have Shrivel and Fester Creep. And so we're able to board those in as well. Decide I only want to bring in the Fester Creep though, as the Shrivel feels like overboarding a little bit. We'll see whether that is the case in the game. But with 2 really nice sideboard cards here, and I believe I took out the Statuary to improve my mana, as I bring in some, like another double green card. I think I took out the Spectre as well. But yeah, after that upgrade, and I think I also took out the Worm, because I'm just trying to curve out here. That definitely was a nice change I was able to make here. Alright, so we're back for game number 3. Could easily lose to this deck. It is very strong. Fortunately, we find 2-drop, 3-drop removal spell as our hand here, so very, very good start for us. Opponent has turn 1 Colonnade, which is also a good start for them. We attack with the Crawl Warrior here, and then just drop a 3/3. Opponent is not doing anything here, which is very good for me. Then I just drop... Oh, no, I was wrong. They have Response to kill my Truffle Snout, which is pretty annoying. There's nothing I can do to save it, though, and ultimately I'm still fine with this. Crawl Warrior is probably the better creature, and I'm happy I get to keep that in play. Then I drop the Aether Seer, and it's on the opponent to figure out something to do to beat my board. They have the Sunscape Master, which is a pretty nice card, but fortunately does die to the Hunt the Weak. Decide here to make the Ether Seer bigger and use that to fight the Master, because I'm going to have a pretty big Crawl Warrior here just next turn with that 6th land. Opponent now has a Visionary Augmenter, which is a pretty annoying card for me here. It's going to take something good for me to be able to get through it, and fortunately for me, we rip one of the sideboard cards off the top of the deck in that Fester Creep. Would play a little bit better as Shrivel here, because I'd be able to cast that Listed as well, but not going to complain. So, trade my Fester Creep for their 4-drop, and we get in 4 damage as well. Opponent now has Selfless Cathar, which is pretty interesting. Not sure what the idea is with that one, but they are in pretty dire straits here. So we draw Serpent Warrior off the top, which means we're going to be able to double spell with 3 drops this turn, unless we want to try to pump the Crawl Warrior, but that doesn't seem like the plan. Opponent has Deputy of Acquittals, which we are fine with, and it looks like their plan is to double block the Ether Seer, which it is. Opponent has shown me Excise in that previous game, which is an effect that exiles an attacking creature unless its controller pays X. So if I pump that Crawl Warrior to try to put them to 1, then they can just Excise X1 again, and then I'm in horrible shape. So I need to let this damage happen to play around Excise and to develop my board. So now, with a few creatures in play, things are definitely looking up for me. Opponent just passes the turn here. We go for an attack with the Crawl Warrior, the only one that can attack into the Colonnade. Opponent fires up the Colonnade. We are very hopeful that we'll get a trade here, or that we just get to eat the Colonnade, I mean. So we pump our Crawl Warrior, and unfortunately the opponent has a Reprisal, which is a pretty big blowout here. Not Excise, but still a big punish, potentially, for pumping the mana into the Warrior last turn. So just like the Legion's Judgment in the previous match, these destroy 4+ power cards are quite nice against us. So nice play from the opponent once again, using the Colonnade for mana after activating it. Opponent now has Gustwalker in play and Colonnade activation, so we're just kind of sitting here hoping to draw something relevant. Unfortunately we don't, we just find the Swamp. Opponent also just draws nothing. This time we draw a Forest, so we're just passing the turn back and forth here. Good old top deck war. Looks like this time the opponent goes for a Sift into a Samite Pilgrim, which is a little bit more relevant for them. We find a Forest, and now they don't have the Colonnade activation up anymore, and we actually get to make a really good trade for us here. So we get to use this Listed to turn the Serpent Warrior into something that must be blocked by other creatures, and because of that, now we get to make it so they have to trade Gustwalker and Samite Pilgrim for the Serpent Warrior, which maybe they would do anyway. They are at 4 life, but now we get to end that effect with the Listed, so the Listed sticks around. That's kind of the theme of the Listed here. It's a really, really broken effect, and now, yeah, we've just made a really nice, at least attempt at a trade for us. It looks like the opponent has Ghostly Flicker, so we're trading with that instead, which is not ideal. But the good news about this play is that the opponent just spent a spell to do that, a pretty powerful spell too, and we just used our stuff that was on board. So still not a horrible exchange for us. Opponent decides not to attack with the Gustwalker, so we find a Whisper Agent here. So that's going to be an important one for us in future turns, but for now we are just passing. Opponent now goes for Experimental Aviator, which is a pretty powerful thing for them to do here. They don't quite have that Colonnade activation up, but apparently they could have done things differently here. They could have animated that Colonnade, attacked with it, then post-combat played that Aviator, so 4 points of damage that they didn't get there. Here though, at the end of the turn, we're going to have that Whisper Agent come down. We find Warbriar Blessing, which is quite nice for us here. So just like last time, we're going to be able to use Blessing with a 3-power creature to kill something in the face of the Samite Pilgrim, so we're, I think, killing the Samite Pilgrim itself. We turn the Whisper Agent into a 3/4. Opponent prevents 2 damage to Gustwalker. And so now, once again, we have a broken play with the Lycid. So the 3/4 is a better creature than the 3/3 at this point. If we Lycid something up, they have to block with everything but the Colonnade, which they can't animate. And we can't kill the Gustwalker with 2 damage prevented to it. But what we can do is we can kill both Thopters, and we can get in 3 damage here. So this is still a very good time for us to do that. So we make a nice attack here. Opponent has to throw everything onto that warrior. We do kill the 2 Thopters, and we end the Lycid effect, of course. Opponent goes down to 1 life. They're basically dead to any creature here because of that awesome Lycid ability. Opponent has to just pass the turn. As we draw Mutagenic Growth. And so now Mutagenic Growth changes things for us. So we get to attack with both of our creatures, so now the Lycid is actually going to function as a creature. And then the opponent has to fire up a Colonnade, presumably, and make some blocks here. And we get to use the Mutagenic Growth to kill the Colonnade, regardless of which creature it blocks here. So this is going to be a pretty nice and important turn for us. And the Colonnade blocks the 3/4, the Gustwalker blocks the Lycid. Kind of interesting that they wanted to trade the Lycid for the Walker as opposed to putting the 0/3 on it, but you know, not an insane play. You basically do have to put the Colonnade on the Whisper Agent though. But fortunately for me, that means I get to use that Mutagenic Growth to kill the Colonnade. My Whisper Agent survives, and now I have a 3/4 versus a 0/3, and opponent's at 1 life. Opponent has Elite Instructor, so they're getting much deeper through their deck than I am. As now we draw, I think, something very ironic. Yes, we draw Reclaiming Vines. So after 14 turns of that Celestial Colonnade being in play, suddenly we find the answer to it now that we spent the Mutagenic Growth, which is definitely a bummer, but can't really complain because we are in a pretty good board state here. We attack and the opponent has to chump because they are at 1, so that 0/3 jumps in the way. Opponent just passes the turn. So we could go for a finishing blow here, but it's way too easy for things to go wrong if I do that. I also just don't need to do that. So I just try to kill that. I'm still thinking about Excise here. Looks like I don't need to go for the finishing blow here, end of turn. I play my land pre-combat even though I already have the Excise covered, I believe. And sure enough, there it is. After thinking about it a couple times this game, the opponent finally has it. Excise, X equals 10, and we have 11 mana. So that's going to be enough for us to win this game. Really, really close. 17 turns of intense battling. Only now do we find some good draw steps, but really, really great grindy game, and we do get there. Alright, we are back for the finals now against Opa, an absolute limited master. And we are on the draw, and we know that Opa is on mono red. We have Serpent Warrior as our first play, so things are not looking great, but we can't really afford to mulligan hands like this. I don't know if we mulliganed this whole draft. So, opponent leads on Double Mountain, no plays, which I'm pretty happy about. We draw Pima Outrider, but still missing a land. Opponent has Goblin Rough Rider, which unfortunately is looking to trade with the Serpent Warrior at this point, though we do get to go use the Mutagenic Growth. So we just lose a ton of life here. First we lose 3 life to that Serpent Warrior, then the opponent has a Brazen Scourge, which is a very nice red aggressive card. Attack with both, we put the Serpent Warrior on the Scourge, and the opponent, unfortunately for them, goes for a Precise Strike. Nice combat trick, but Mutagenic Growth is nicer. So we use our life total as a resource and get to 2 for 1 them here, which is very nice for us. So now I believe I just go for a Hunt the Weak rather than playing a Pima Outrider, because if I attack for 3 and then play a Pima Outrider, then I have to worry about a removal spell from them. But if I do things this way, then I just have a 4/4 and they have no board. So that works out pretty nicely for me. don't really want to risk them having removal basically when I'm already at 12 life, and every removal spell counts for a bunch of damage. And so now that we've turned our Serpent Warrior into a 4/4, we can use this Warbriar Blessing to turn it into a 4/6 and kill their Lathnu Sailback. So our removal is just lining up perfectly against them here. Really just the nut draw from us. We get to drop the Whispering Spectre as well. And the opponent, takes the damage, so now they're staring down a 4/6 and a Spectre, which doesn't really do anything. They have a Flummoxed Cyclops now, as we rip a Tidy Conclusion to get that thing out of the way. And we attack with both of our creatures. We decide to sack the Spectre, basically thinking that it's not really going to get much better. Either they have like 2 or at least 1 land in hand, or they don't. And if they do have at least 1 land, then I mean they're just playing their spells next turn anyway. So we do get a Nimbleblade Kenra out of their hand with the Spectre, and the opponent has a Hellspark Elemental, which is a sweet old card, but really scary. Fortunately, it's not something that sticks around, so it does have Unearth, which means it can come back, but we can just make a 4/4 here, which threatens to block it, and we have 2 lethal threats now, and that's just going to end the game here. So amazing draws from us, lost 5 life to our own cards, and just had removal at the perfect time. Alright, no changes to our deck after game 1, and here we have pretty nice hand, missing, well, Swamp would be a great draw, would enable all of our 3 drops here, but keeping regardless on the draw, and we do find the Swamp, which is perfect because it was just probably the best draw on the deck unless you count a 2-drop into a Swamp. Opponent has a more aggressive start this time with the Igneous Cur into the Rough Rider. Now we go for a Truffle Snout. Normally this thing is just a 3/3, but as a 2/2 would trade for either of their creatures anyway, get to gain 4 life. So kind of the opposite of the Serpent Warrior this time, which is very nice for us. Opponent now has a Goblin Tunneler. And I believe I should have navigated this turn a little differently. So here I drop the Ether Seer, and basically the Tunneler is a nice combo with the Igneous Cur, and even though I don't want to open myself up to the opponent having a removal spell and getting in some free damage here by making an attack, I think I 100% should have made the attack with the Truffle Snout, and try to make the Igneous Cur trade for it. At the time I was thinking about First Strike trick, like the Precise Strike that we saw, and that would be very rough for us, right? Especially if they have a removal spell to follow it up, but I think I was a little bit too conservative there. Should have just gone for it. Opponent has the best card in their deck, Deus of Calamity, 5 mana 6/6 trample. If I let all 6 damage hit me, then they get to blow up one of my lands, which is just horrible for me. So they get in a point here with the Igneous Cur, and I am just staring at a bunch of cards that do not answer a 6/6. And so I believe my play here is just the Wild Leotau, and I think I try to go for a double block. So the opponent fires up the Tunneler on the Igneous Cur. We put the Leotau and the Truffle Snout in front of the Deus, hoping it's not going to be able to damage us, but the opponent has a Sure Strike, and that means that they not only get to hit me for 3 damage, thanks to that trample, but they also just 2-for-1 me here. So even though my hand is all gas, we are in horrible shape. We do have a ton of removal that could answer that Deus. Hunt the Weak, not one of those spells, but they don't pump the Cur, which is scary for me here too. Now they play a Flummoxed Cyclops, so once again, great curve out from them. Now we have Mutagenic Growth, which is a super important card for us here. So now I get to choose whether I want to kill the Tunneler or the Igneous Cur. Seems like a pretty easy choice for me to kill the Cur, because that is the problematic card. If I kill the Tunneler, then, I still have to worry about the Cur, but I don't really have to worry about the Tunneler at this point, and now I can use that Mutagenic Growth in combat here. So the opponent goes for an attack. The Tunneler should probably swing in, but it doesn't feel like it this time. So now I basically have 2 options. I can use the Mutagenic Growth to try to 2-for-1 myself and trade for the Deus, or I can use the Mutagenic Growth to try to eat the Flummoxed Cyclops, turning my creature into a 6/5, and then figure out a double block against the Deus later. This is actually a really hard spot, but basically what it comes down to here is if I double block if I block the dais and then try to 2-for-1 myself, then I still have a 4-4 in play, and I don't really have a good way to answer it, right? Because next turn, with 3 3-drops in my hand and not necessarily a way to double spell, I can only play 1 3-drop, which means I'm getting hit for 4 damage. So I actually have to worry about getting hit for damage for another entire turn. Not to mention I can't really afford to block that 3-2 while I am, making sure that I don't die to the dais and the Cyclops. So basically I'm just in really rough shape here. I have to sacrifice a land and take 6 damage here just to make sure I have the Ether Seer in play, which I can then use to double block in conjunction with one of my other creatures and then trade for that dais, hopefully. So that is the play I end up going with here. Fall to 9 life, lose a forest, so really bad stuff for me. Fortunately, the opponent has no follow-up. If they did, I think I would just die. We get a little bit punished here as we draw the land. We would have been able to double spell this turn, and then suddenly the game would not be, too bad for us. But here I just decide to pass the turn. We get to flash in a Whisper Agent here. Whether we play the Rhino or the Whisper Agent, either way, both of our creatures are going to die, and either way we're able to kill the dais here with a double block. So that is what happens. We Whisper Agent, bin a swamp with the Surveil, and then we make the trade. Opponent deals us 3 damage. Once again, that Tunneler should probably sneak in. And yeah, it looks like they just had a land, so they're flooding pretty hard at this point. We do draw a land, so now we get to double spell, which is pretty nice. Though the Whispering Spectre not doing too much on this board, basically just trading for a Tunneler. Opponent has a nice one here off the top with a Battle Rattle Shaman. And so that thing is going to be a really nice combo with the Tunneler for them here, if they're able to use it. And so we get to trade with the Thriving Rhino, but next turn is looking rough. But we draw Putrefy, which bails us out. We kill the Battle Rattle. Now our 1/1s are staring at each other, and the opponent draws and plays a land. And we draw Pima Outrider here. And so I think I just make a 3/3 and a 1/1. I think that was my plan against this Tunneler, and I go for an attack for 1, decide not to sack it, but I think it would make just as much sense here, if not more, to just leave the Spectre back. It doesn't really do anything as an attacker at this point, and I can just make a 4/4 then, instead of having to worry about making a servo to trade with the Tunneler, potentially, if the 3/3 gets killed. So we draw a good one here in the Dread Statuary. Attack with the opponent for 4, we get to play the Statuary, which is going to be a good attacker for us, and the Spectre stops attacking because we don't really expect that poison to be relevant. Opponent plays a Nimbleblade Kenra, and now we have a Warbriar Blessing, which is a pretty nice way of being able to kill that Nimbleblade. Once again, not worried about the Tunneler. It's just going to trade for like our servo if it has to, but we get to fire up the Statuary now, get a nice attack for 7 in here, or 8 actually, that servo can swing in as well. Opponent has the Lathnu Sailback. They do have a Fireball in their deck as well, so I'm constantly thinking about that, because they did mention that. And fortunately here we rip a Tidy Conclusion. This actually was almost a pretty big punish for not making the making the Pima Outrider a 4/4, because a 4/6 would have a reasonable attack into this Lathnu Sailback or a good block on it, but a 3/5 does not have either of those. So instead we get slightly rewarded here. We get to gain a life with the Tidy Conclusion, and then we go for an attack. The opponent finally trades for the servo, but they are staring down 3 creatures effectively, and they have 0. So they tap a bunch of mana, but fortunately it's not the Fireball. They're not quite dead on board. I cannot attack with the Statuary because they get to eat that, but I do get to attack with the Outrider. Fortunately, I just rip another removal spell off the top, Finishing Blow. So we're going to, I think, attack. Yeah, we just attack with the 1 here, basically playing around some kind of haste creature. Opponent's down to 2 life. And now they have Heroes of the Revel, which does make 2 creatures to block our 2 lethal threats, but unfortunately the 1/1 Satyr cannot block here. And so it feels like we've been pretty lucky to draw out of this as we top deck yet another removal spell. So now we get to Doomblade that Heroes, and we just crash in with everything, and the opponent dies. So we finally got there. Really, really sweet draft. Very close, grindy games. This was another 15-turn game. But now that means I am 9-0 in the last 3 Chaos drafts I've done with my community. So feeling pretty good about how things are going in that regard, and looking forward to any drafts in the future here. So thank you all for watching. Be sure to join my Discord if you want to participate in drafts like this. They're always a blast. And see you again soon.